Welcome back to Tungsten Tales. We're here to discuss the 2021 Premier League and what we've seen so far from all the players involved. Slightly different this year with it being blocks and not every Thursday night as we've come to expect from the Premier League. But it's certainly been an interesting year. Michael van Gerwen does top the Premier League table. He's backed up by Nathan Aspinall, Dimitri van der Beek and Jose de Souza. Some of the bigger names, some of the more experienced names like Peter Wright, he is down the bottom. Despite after the elimination of Rob Cross and of course Ben Durrant, also Gary Anderson, he came right back into it in the final phase we've seen over the last 3 days. It's interesting. There's plenty of names that are still in the mix for the playoffs. Peter Wright, probably the only name we'd expect not to make the playoffs now. Michael van Gerwen does top. Just your thoughts so far, Sam. It's been an interesting season, hasn't it?
Yeah, he's really been struggling as Peter Wright. He's got a shoulder problem, I believe, and of course he's been tinkering darts as per usual, which is never good, especially when you've got an injury. I think I remember in a game the other night, I think it took him one leg to actually switch darts. I think it was against Gary Anderson when he ended up getting smashed. Gary Anderson's been one of the big stories of the latest block. His resurgence and going on about the bookies and how they've kind of made him want to play and perform to his best, which he has been doing. And yeah, of course, Michael van Gerwen coming off the Super Series, he's just been doing what he does best at times. Absolutely brilliant performances against Vandenberg and Wade, where absolutely just blew him off the board. Of course, especially with Wade when he ended up averaging 110, he couldn't even get hardly a leg against Van Gerwen. Is he back? Is the big question. It's one of those. It's one of those that just keeps getting bandied around on social media. I personally want to see him win a title before I give him that tab, but he's certainly on the right track. Of course, even with Aspinall in second, he's had 2 defeats out of 3 out of the latest block. He's not fully through to the playoffs as of yet. Same with Vandenberg, and then of course Jose de Souza to end the top 4 has been absolutely brilliant as well, and could have had a full points all like Michael van Gerwen if he didn't quote unquote bottle it against James Wade when he was 6-2 up. So yeah, it's been brilliant. Some real intriguing stories coming from the latest block of Premier League action.
We'll start with Michael van Gerwen as you brought it up. I mean, yeah. You look at the 3 nights of action we saw just last week, and you've got huge averages from 2 of the nights, and then what he will say is a disappointing average on one of the other nights, that 95 average against Johnny Clayton. But he did win that game. On the other 2 nights, 107. And then on the first night back, it was 109, nearly 110 average against Dimitri van der Beek, who averaged 107 himself. Those sort of averages are the vintage Michael van Gerwen that we have come to expect over the years. But it's just about eradicating those poor games in between. If he's doing it 2 out of 3 times, most likely he's gonna continue winning games with 95 averages. But if he can continuously produce those 105 pluses, that's the Michael van Gerwen we saw in 2013, 2014, picking up 10, 15 titles a season. And if he's doing that, then he is back. But he's got to get rid of the 90 sort of plus averages that we are occasionally still seeing from him.
He's been going down to 90 a lot, and with the past 3 wins, he's kind of snapped a streak where he almost went up to like 105, 106, and then went straight back down to 90, sometimes even 89. But a lot of the time, he'll end up picking up those wins, like with Johnny Clayton, who's he's kind of had his number as of late. He's been kind of the Simon Whitlock of the majors, alongside the Wizard, and he was predicted by many to win again against him. Vandenberg he's had a good run of form against van Gerwen recently, and then of course we have the crowds coming back in the final half, which hopefully he'll be able to bring. Hopefully he'll be able to bring back a full Michael van Gerwen that'll be roaring all over the stage without on command, as opposed to what he's been doing, where he's been doing almost a Gerwen Price as of late. But yeah, it's interesting to talk about him being back. It's like I say, I don't think he's fully back yet, but it's great signs for a player who he's really flattered to deceive. Of course, on the Super Series, he still hasn't won a title this year, and it's May, albeit with coronavirus, as he kind of pointed out. It's not really been not really been the best at times, but he was averaging 90 odd there and getting beat quite easily by the likes of Josh Payne, Willie Ball, and Simon Whitlock produced a brilliant display against him on the Super Series. Gino Voss, who was just filling up the numbers, even was brilliant against him. So if he can kind of win this Premier League title, it'll be a massive confidence boost going into World Match Play. And I wouldn't be surprised if he wins some World Match Play. I'm putting that out there now, especially with the crowds coming back. He's going to be pumped up and fired up. Of course, then we'll end up getting Gerwen Price back as well. He hasn't been in this Premier League, and he's been kind of the forgotten man, really, despite being world number one and world champion. But it's still gone on without him, and it's still been excellent, this Premier League so far at times.
Yeah, it feels like an awful long time since we've actually seen Gerwen Price. I think last time we saw him was probably at the UK Open. There might have been some Super Series events after that. I'm not 100% sure, but we haven't seen him in the Premier League. We didn't see him in the block of Super Series events out in Germany either. Been an awful long time since we've seen Gerwen Price, and you have to wonder what work he's been putting in behind the scenes, how much practice he's been putting in, because the next tournament we're going to see him in is, well, hopefully we will see him at the next block of Super Series events, but in terms of TV tournaments, well, match play, and that's still a couple of months away. So it's a long way to go without a TV appearance for Gerwen Price, and I wouldn't be surprised if he goes up in the World Match Play and he has a little bit of a tough time, especially with the crowds being back. You don't know what it's going to be like for him. We will now drop down to the bottom of the Premier League, from the top to the bottom, and it is Peter Wright there. We briefly discussed it earlier. Those last two nights in particular for Peter Wright were not good at all. He didn't settle at all. Switching darts, shoulder seemingly not right. What's going on with Peter Wright? Because he doesn't look half the player he was 12 months ago.
He's been poor at times all year, really. Barring win a title at the Super Series, a lot of people have kind of pointed out, you know, in terms of whether or not we'll ever actually see the top Peter Wright again, and whether he can emerge like he did as world champion. He's kind of had a tough time of it, being world champion during the coronavirus era. He's not kind of had the fans, and he like Michael Van Gerwen's kind of pointed out, when fans do actually return, he's going to be fired up and ready. So it'll be interesting to see that as well, especially in the latter half of the Premier League, when he's not fully out of it yet, but you know, can he do the unthinkable of sorts of, especially players like Jose, who ended up winning a title without a crowd. Players like that kind of drop off and tail off. You know, can he kind of take advantage? James Wade, even, you know, he's not been performing that well in the Premier League this year, but can he kind of revive his fortunes? You know, I think it is a bit of a crisis with Wright. I don't know what's up with him in terms of his shoulder. I don't know if it's just being in the bubble, and it's like Anderson said, in terms of being in your room for 24 hours a day and kind of coming out for free of them to play in the Premier League. You know, I don't know if it's an issue with that, or whether it's a myriad of stuff that's kind of gone on throughout the year. But it's definitely a crisis, and it'll be interesting to see how he uses the next few weeks off to kind of help himself out in terms of his shoulder and also his game as well, and sticking to a set of darts ultimately, because he's been chopping and changing too much, and yes, it's a massive problem for him, and it's it is becoming a crisis at this point for him, yeah, for sure. Don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, you mentioned the darts. I mean, 2 out of those 3 nights in that final block we saw, he actually started with one set and switched back to the diamond darts, which we've seen over and over again, and he's had plenty of success with them. And at one point, I can't remember which night it was, he did one leg with the darts. It was the gold darts, I believe.
Yeah, Anderson defeat, I think, when he lost 8-3 to him.
Yeah. One leg.
Only one leg.
And he switched back to the diamond darts, and you just wonder, I mean, you're obviously not getting anywhere with the darts you choose to start with. And as soon as you put the diamond darts in your hand, you seem to be getting a little bit more success. So, I mean, obviously a consistency comes from that set, as he seems to keep going back for them. So, I mean, why wouldn't you stick with them? You mentioned Gary Anderson there. What a 3 nights it was for him. Probably the best Gary Anderson we've seen this year. 107 average against Dimitri Vandenberg, 104 0.6 to defeat his fellow Scot Peter Wright. Did lose to Jose de Souza, but you know what, that is some week for Gary Anderson, and if he can reproduce that form in the final 4 nights of Premier League action, then maybe Premier League, a playoff place rather, is something that Gary Anderson will be partaking in. If he's in that playoff, in that top 4, then there's absolutely no reason Gary Anderson can't win it.
Yeah, who can bet against him? He's only 2 points off. Of course, he has Clayton ahead of him on 14 points, and then Jose de Souza on 14 points. You know, 2 contrasting players really. Clayton's kind of had in different form since the first half when he was leading the table, and he's kind of he came up against Van Gerwen, of course, in a game that in my eyes he should have won, especially how Van Gerwen was playing. You know, he didn't produce his best darts at all, and you know, it's chances like that you ultimately have to take against a player like Van Gerwen, especially in the form he's in at the moment. But you know, comparing Anderson at the start of the Premier League block to the final Premier League block, he's playing Peter Wright, and a lot of people say, you know, it's must win for him. He has to win, otherwise he's out, and then he ends up winning. He ends up winning all but one game during the block. So you know, it's going to be an interesting latter half of the Premier League, and he seems to be really fired up as well. Like I said, in terms of the bookies and people writing him off. Ultimately, I can't remember what odds he was at during or before the Premier League, but it's definitely put a B under his bonnet. And like we know with Anderson, if he has a B under his bonnet, he a lot of the time tends to produce some of his best starts.
Yeah. And the final player I'm going to touch on is Nathan Aspinall. When we made our predictions quite a while ago, I picked Dimitri Van den Berg, Jose de Souza, all to be up there in the playoffs. But one player I don't think either of us predicted, and we may have both predicted them to actually get relegated from that first phase. I can't quite remember. Is Nathan Aspinall. Didn't have the best block last week, but what a resurgence it's been really for Nathan Aspinall, because he wasn't good last year, and he's put himself right back in that mix. He's gone back to the old darts, didn't stick around with the new ones for too long, and he's right up there. He's producing some great stuff.
Yeah, he's been absolutely brilliant at times. You know, I'm one of those people. I kind of wrote him off. So I'm sorry, Nathan, for that. I'm sorry for writing you off.
I'm sure Nathan won't mind. He loves it when people write him off.
I think before the Premier League, I was one of those people who did. I think I even said in the video that he'd get relegated alongside Glenn Doran, and that I was going to put money on it. But he's been brilliant. Of course, switching back to those old darts, he didn't really have a great time with the new set. He's ended up going over to Germany as well during the blocks in between, and has played brilliantly on the Super Series, albeit not getting a win. It was a lot of the time in the latter stages you had him, Dimitri Van den Berg, Jose de Souza, alongside the familiar names, you know, Gabriel Clemens, Jermaine What I Mean, as Martijn Kleermaker, Devan Dijvenbode even. And he's as much as he hasn't really benefited in terms of coming back and claiming wins, you know, he's definitely up there for the title. And of course, we ended up seeing last year, he ended up coming from nowhere as an outside debutant, having won the UK Open and ended up reaching the final facing Glenn Doran. And considering that lineup on finals, not as bad as those semi-finals and finals were, if you remember all the way back then. Reaching an unexpected final against Glenn Doran, and you know, I wouldn't be surprised if it's the same thing again. Even if we get, for example, Van Gerwen, Anderson, Jose, Aspinall and Van den Berg in that. I wouldn't even be surprised if it's an Aspinall Van den Berg final, given how well they've been playing as of late. So it's going to be interesting to see as well with the crowds coming back, because he's another player. He's another player that absolutely thrives on the crowds being there. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see with him whether or not he can take that forward, or whether or not it's just a good bit of form behind closed doors.
As you mentioned a few of those more names, I'm going to push you for a sort of 60%, 2/3 through the season prediction. I have no idea how far we are from the original predictions. Probably a long way, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'll give you my names first. I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about it. I'm going to pick Michael van Gerwen there. I don't know whether he'll win the league. I would probably edge towards yes on that one. And then the other names to reach the playoffs. Dimitri Van den Berg's been too good for me. Was very unlucky to lose a couple of games in the final block. Averaged over a ton in all 3 of his games. So Dimitri Vandenberg definitely in there for me. I think Nathan Aspinall's probably got just enough of a cushion. It's tailed off very, very slightly, but I think he's got enough of a cushion to make it there. And the final one I'm going to pick is Gary Anderson. I think the form's there. And I think that the fact that he's got 4 nights in a row again, if he plays well on that first night and he's got Johnny Clayton on that first night back, absolutely huge game for him. If he wins that, he's right in the mix for the playoffs. So I'm basically going with the top 4 as they are now, just switching Anderson and De Souza. What are your predictions, Sam?
I'm going to go quite similar in terms of Van Gogh. In terms of Van Gogh and winning the league winners bonus, winning the league and going on to the playoffs and full of confidence and likely winning the whole competition in my eyes. I've kind of said it in terms of a confidence booster with him not having won a title so far this year and quite flattering to deceive, albeit in the UK Open when he reached the last stages, he ended up coming up against Luke Humphries, who was absolutely brilliant and has become a bit of a star this year, albeit without a lot of action. Of course, like in terms of Nathan Aspinall, I kind of agree with that in terms of him having a cushion. He's on 15 points. I kind of say the same about Dimitri Vandenberg, so you kind of find it out for those last 2 spots. And I'm going to put an outside. I'm going to say, so I'm going to stay the same in terms of Jose De Souza. The amount of 180s he's been hitting, the averages he's been hitting, he's almost just been kind of doing a mental Suljevic as such in terms of the Premier League. He's been playing absolutely brilliant, but he's not been able to get over the line in certain games. When he ended up playing James Wade, I think that might come back to haunt him when it ends up coming towards the latter stage of the Premier League when he ended up 6-2 up and he didn't end up closing it out and ended up serving out 7-all draw. And then instead of him, I kind of say Johnny Clayton. Mm-hmm. If he can kind of revive his fortunes, it's going to be one of 3 players in my eyes for that final 4 spot. As much as you're pushing me for a name, I kind of say De Souza, Clayton, or Anderson is definitely in there. I don't see Wade or Wright having a chance having a chance in hell of getting to the top 4. But if I'm to pluck a name, I'd probably say Johnny Clayton to kind of end off that top 4 as kind of a bit of an outside show.
Well, fair enough. I look forward to seeing Peter Wright, James Wade, Johnny Clayton, and possibly Jose De Souza in the playoffs. Then. Thank you very much for your predictions, Sam, and we'll see you all very, very soon. Don't forget to get your predictions in the comments as well. Thank you very much for watching.